Well, hello again. Welcome to Horror in Detail. Today we are going to share creepy Reddit horror stories. First story. This story was shared by you/CheckUR crawlspaces. In November of 1999, I went missing for 3 days from the basement of my childhood home. As a young child, I was abducted from the basement of my childhood home and taken somewhere that I still struggle to quantify or explain. I suppose this is my attempt to put down as honestly as possible what happened to me and hoping open-minded individuals might find this story. This was well over 20 years ago. I was 8 years old with 2 siblings. My older sister, Denise, was 10, and my younger brother, Howie, would have been 5. We had a very conventional American Midwestern upbringing. My parents were fairly happy and we all shared a beautiful home in a nice neighborhood, riding the high of 90s consumerism. My childhood was extremely happy up until a certain point. Things changed when my sister and I created an anomaly, a haunting of sorts, in the closet of our playroom as children. The dolls assembled in the closet we had designated as the Barbie Threader and took their seats. The spooks and thrills we felt began to elevate as the first choreographed spooky occurrences interrupted our peaceful cinema-attending dolls. My sister was the architect of this story and I followed along, absolutely terrified. Tensions grew as the story built to the crescendo. Woody from Toy Story was possessed by a demon and rose from his seat, high into the air, turning to gaze at the audience. Bedlam has been established for the crowd of Barbies and our pretend fear had become quite real. Our emotions were palpable as the Barbies began their exorcism, calling for Satan to leave Woody as he began to shake and convulse before the Threader scream. We snapped back to reality when the room suddenly went dark for a split second and the light began flashing rapidly. Denise and I turned to each other and screamed, clutching one another in desperation. Our senses came back to us quickly. Mom was unamused, standing in the doorway of the playroom switching the light on and off, informing us she'd been calling down the stairs for 5 minutes and we can't just get sucked into games when we have to go brush our teeth and get ready for bed. Holding hands, Denise and I ran out in front of Mom so she would create a buffer between us and the looming unknown of the basement stairs when the lights went off. One of the most agonizing parts of my childhood was that very real fear of monsters and demons snatching at my heels every time I flew up the stairs after playtime, and that night it was an especially present sensation. Admittedly, parts of my memories have faded. I'm rusty on the exact order of things, but I remember the hole in the wall showed up closely enough after the haunted movie theater game that I connected the 2 events in my mind. Denise and I made a spooky story for the closet and a few days later, a spooky dark hole showed up on the wall on the other side of the closet. It just made sense to me. Howie actually noticed the hole first. I got home from school and Mom asked me to get Howie from the basement where he was playing. Going to the stairs, I looked down and saw Howie was hunkered into the corner that was a few feet from the bottom of the stairs. He was on his hands and knees with his ear pressed to the floor, like he was looking for something underneath a shelf, except it was just the wall. I wasn't too thrown off by this. Howie was 5 and a weirdo to boot, so I yelled down at him to come upstairs. My mother said from the other room to actually go get him and to not just yell. Rolling my eyes, I made my way down the stairs to Howie, who still was not acknowledging me in any way. When I got to him, I placed my hand on his back and he jolted like he was startled. I asked him what he was looking at and he got up off of his hands, and while sitting on his knees, he pointed to a hole in the corner. It was about the size and shape as if someone had ripped the corner off a playing card and traced it out. Inside it was pitch black, somehow blacker than black. Something about it made my tummy hurt. I asked him what was in there. He calmly told me there was a funny person in there, hiding in the wall. My tummy ache lurched and I almost vomited when he said that. I'm sure an adult would have written that off as childish imagination, but as a child with an imagination myself, I immediately took him at face value. There was someone hiding in the wall. Up until that moment, the most scared I had ever been was the other day playing in the closet with my sister, more scared than when a thunderstorm took out the power and a tree branch broke through my bedroom window, more scared than sneaking behind the couch while my parents watched Interview with a Vampire last Halloween. The moment Howie said what he said, that became the most scared I'd ever been. Every fiber of my being was screaming to get away. I grabbed Howie by the arm. I could hear him complain, but couldn't understand him through my adrenaline. It felt animalistic. I ran up the stairs, dragging poor Howie behind me. I slammed the basement door and ran to Mom, Howie still in tow, and I began wailing to her about a man in the walls downstairs. My poor mother was completely confused. I had been fine just a minute ago and she had been downstairs numerous times throughout the day doing laundry and had noticed nothing awry. I was finally able to calm my tears enough to explain to her what I found Howie doing and what he had said about someone in the walls. She laughed and explained that was impossible because it was a basement, an unfinished basement, to be exact. She explained to me all of the exterior walls were cement bricks with dirt on the other side, the wall to our playroom was just wood and drywall, there was only a few inches of space. Definitely not room enough for funny people to hide. She tried to reassure me by going down, but as soon as she walked towards the basement door, I began to wail again. Seeing that wasn't going to help, she made me a snack and had me sit and watch cartoons with Howie and Denise. I was beginning to relax by the time my dad came home. We had supper and Mom told Dad about the hole in the wall downstairs. Dad was a contractor, so he felt quite confident doing the repair. He used a moisture meter to ensure a leak hadn't caused the hole. When a water source had been eliminated as the culprit, he figured one of us had kicked a hole in the wall and did not want to fess up, so he patched the drywall, good as new. With a reassuring kiss on the head, he later told me he had it covered and that he checked and there was no one in there. I slept peacefully that night and over the next few days, the discomfort I felt while in the basement waned slightly. I still refused to be down there by myself, but Denise and I almost always played together so it was rarely an issue, until Denise had to go to the bathroom one day. I wanted to go up with her, but we were in the middle of creating an easy bake oven confection and she wanted me to stay to watch and make sure it didn't burn. I felt great apprehension and told her we could unplug the oven and then plug it back in when we got back. Denise called me the B word. Baby. My pride was devastated and my fate was sealed. I committed to my easy bake vigil and Denise was up the stairs, leaving a very heavy silence in the playroom. I tried to keep my mind occupied, reading the directions on the box for the cake mix and then fussing around with a random Barbie. A feeling like I was being watched appeared suddenly in my consciousness. I dutifully tried to ignore it as I felt my heart beat faster and my discomfort rapidly grew. I threw myself harder into my Barbie fussing, dragging that useless plastic brush over her tangled locks, wondering what was taking Denise so long. Behind me, I heard a noise, like a light click or a tap. I froze over the easy bake, my eyes wide. I had definitely not heard my sister come back down the stairs and Howie wasn't even in the house. I heard the sound again. It was coming from the closet. A brief description of the closet, unfinished, lined with particle board. It was maybe 6 feet wide and 3 feet deep. It had no doors. We had play clothes and some winter clothes hung up for storage. Underneath that were some boxes stacked up, and the other half of the closet was a jumbled pile of toys and stuffed animals. It had only been maybe a week since we cleared it out for the doll theater, but it was packed full again. I was absolutely petrified and I wanted to run away, but the closet and the door were in the same wall, so I would have to run closer to the closet to leave, which freaked me out. The sound continued from behind me, and as if I was under the Pied Piper's spell, I felt my head turn, leading my eyes to see what was producing the noise. When the closet came into my view, it took me a moment to see through the visual noise of the clutter and find the source of the tapping. My mind processed what I was seeing and I began to scream uncontrollably. Feet and legs were underneath me before I even was aware I was moving, fleeing, flying up the stairs. Screaming. I couldn't stop screaming. When I had turned around and looked behind me in the playroom, sticking out from under the hanging clothes and jackets, was a black and skeletal hand, almost like a mummy, pinching a Barbie high heel between its fingers and walking the shoe across the boxes. Howie was right. There was someone in the walls. Dad and Denise went down to investigate for me and they were unable to find anyone. Later that night, though, Denise came into my room with her hands behind her back and tears in her eyes. I asked what was wrong and without saying a word, she produced her left hand and opened it. A mint green Barbie heel lay in her palm. I immediately felt very uncomfortable and I asked her if that was the one from her jewelry chest. She shook her head and brought out her other hand and revealed an identical mint shoe. Denise explained the second one was the one from her bedroom, the first one she had found on the boxes in the basement closet. We were both incredibly scared. Despite having a lavish doll and wardrobe situation, we only had one pair of mint green heels, one of which we both knew I had lost during a road trip at a McDonald's in Georgia last year. It had caused a huge fight between us because those heels went perfectly with Denise's favorite doll dress and she had melodramatically stored the other shoe in her jewelry box as a sign of reverence. Yet here we sat with, what to us felt like, extremely convincing evidence of supernatural occurrences we could not begin to rationalize. We didn't even discuss it. Denise stayed in my bed with me that night and I honestly think we hardly slept. We were so afraid. After that, we avoided the basement at all costs. It had always been a little spooky down there, but it had quickly surpassed the creepy tolerances of little girls that wanted to play with dolls and host story time for their stuffed animals. We'd plan recon missions ahead of time for toys we wanted, begging our parents to come down with us while we snatched the toys we needed that day and fled back to the safety of the upstairs. My mother is a neat freak and didn't appreciate our messy and toy-cluttered bedrooms, so that coddling did not last long. We were allowed to keep a streamlined collection of toys upstairs, but the rest had to be returned to the playroom. Denise and I were still so scared of the basement that we chose to stop playing with the majority of our toys. We pursued other endeavors, reading together or practicing gymnastic tumbles in the yard or watching cartoons. I had done a very successful job skirting around the basement and had not gone down there alone since the night I saw the hand. I had hardly been down there at all, even with a chaperone. That changed one cold and bitter November morning. Mom was very busy, as both Denise and Howie had gotten really sick. She had been running around all night taking care of them, and that morning she had Howie in a cool bath trying to get his fever down. She was on the phone with the doctor in the bathroom. I could hear the gratitude and relief in her voice when they could get Howie in soon to see the doctor. Calling me into the bathroom, She explained that she knew I was scared of the closet downstairs, but she had to watch Howie and needed me to go into the basement and get their coats out of the closet. My initial reaction was to balk and protest, perhaps too vehemently. Mom called me the B word. Brave. My fate was decided. Steeling myself at the top of the stairs, I tried to cling to the bravery instilled inside me by my mother, but with each step down, I felt it evaporate. Halfway down the stairs I noticed the hole was back in the corner. Fighting every instinct in my body, I made myself go down the stairs. It was daylight out, but overcast, so the entire basement had a gloomy light about it from the small windows around the ceiling. I didn't like the way it made the shadows look inky and mysterious. I pressed my back to the handrail as hard as I could when I got to the end of the stairs, giving myself as much space as possible from the hole while sidestepping to the playroom door. Taking a deep breath, I walked into the room, resolute. I knew what I had to do, I knew exactly where their coats were, I needed only to reach out and snatch them off their hangers and then run like hell. Except, when I got myself in front of the closet, I couldn't see anyone's coats. I froze, unsure what to do. I knew they were in there, nestled behind the play clothes and snow pants were our winter coats, but I absolutely did not want to put my hands in there to find them. My plan had depended on visibility and accessibility. Weighing my options, I decided the worst outcome was disappointing Mom. I gingerly reached out and tugged on the hem of an old bridesmaid dress, guiding it out of the way. Feeling slightly more emboldened after not seeing the hand appear, I very cautiously grabbed the leg of my snow pants and saw with relief the sleeve of my mother's coat underneath. Reaching out to her coat, I felt time slow as I saw the hand suddenly burst out through the clothes, snatching my wrist with surprising strength and firmness. Despite the papery and dusty appearance of the hand, it was quite solid. Barely enough time to whimper, I was yanked into the clothes, I felt my legs scrape over the boxes and I was suddenly in a place in between, not between the closet and the wall, but I think a place between dimensions. Discomfort was my physical baseline there, I don't believe my form was intended to be in that plane. Every inch of my body had what felt like a cold gelatinous layer over it. Breathing felt like static. Despite my physical discomfort, my fear quickly dissipated, my emotions were muted, placidity dominated. I could only feel the faintest flutter of curiosity about where I had found myself, any worry or anxiety felt like it was floating 10 feet below me underwater. Keeping any train of thought became challenging. Slowly, my eyes adjusted to the darkness of this place and pinpricks of light appeared throughout the never-ending darkness, like stars in the sky. The closest light to me looked like a hole in the wall. With dreamy bemusement, I realized it was the hole in our basement wall. The light was enough to illuminate the figure that had dragged me here, and that's exactly all it was, just a figure. Humanoid, completely black, featureless, not even eyes. It looked more like a silhouette than a solid being in this realm, compared to its charcoal appearance outside. I then became aware I wasn't beholden to gravity and I let myself drift away, the figure drifted with me, although I didn't mind them as much here, they didn't seem as scary now. Dreamily, I headed towards the nearest light above me and looked through the hole, gazing suddenly into a scene somewhere in Asia. It looked like a sweatshop, rows of women hunched over whirring sewing machines, a man roamed around and screamed at them. Instantaneously, as soon as my eyes laid sight on this scene, I could feel every person's emotions in that room more vividly than I have even felt my own, the strength, the fear, the misery, the resolution, the defeat, the hope. Everything washed over me at once and it felt amazing. Pure, unadulterated human emotion, even the bad, was intoxicating when experienced this way. After a while, I let myself float onward to the next light. This hole opened into a hospital room somewhere in the world. The people looked white, but I couldn't understand what they were saying. I didn't need to know the language as the scene was universal. A very pregnant woman was in the process of giving birth, the father by her side and the doctor and nurses surrounding her at the bottom. I watched and felt everything in the room as that new life was brought into their world. The exhaustion and pain from the mother, wrapped in an unbridled joy. The acute stress and self-assuredness of the staff as they rushed to monitor the baby and mom. The relief from the father that his family was safe. The sheer love of the parents as they looked down on their newborn. The confusion and pain of the infant that couldn't understand his shockingly cold and bright surroundings. Onward, I moved from that vignette, towards a new light. This one was much dimmer. It was a fairly dark bedroom, but you could tell it was daylight outside from the light around the window. A woman was laying in bed. I could hear her crying. More impactful, I could feel her sadness, and this was an old sadness. Despair and pain hung like incense in the room. That one I didn't understand at the time, and I floated on, my silent companion following close by. So on and so forth, I journeyed through this space in between, witnessing and feeling an unbelievable range of the human experience. I saw the mundane and the glorious. I saw crimes and acts of violence that would bring the most grizzled homicide detective to their knees, yet none of it seemed to disturb me. It all washed over me like dreams. The power and clarity of the emotions while viewing was juxtaposed sharply to the dullness of my current reality, yet it never felt voyeuristic, it simply was. I'm not sure how long I drifted through. Occasionally other figures like my companion would pass by. That was the only time they held my wrist to stop my travels, waiting until the stranger passed, although the others also felt benign to me. The holes sometimes opened up into cracks or openings in walls or ceilings, sometimes it was through an item. Looking around one room, I could see in the reflection of a mirror that I was gazing in through the eyes of a porcelain doll. After a while, I became aware of a distinct melancholy I felt while gliding in the void space when I wasn't distracted by other people's lives. I raised my hands to my face and saw in the dim light my fingers were beginning to turn black, like my companion, whom I was starting to think of as a friend. We shared a sort of understanding despite never saying a word to each other. There was an intuitive logic to how this place worked, similar to the way you simply understand what is true in a dream. What I understood is that I was becoming one of the shadow forms. If I stayed much longer, I would lose my own humanity as I sustained myself emotionally on the sweet nectar of others' feelings, and my physical form metamorphized into a shadow. I understood on some level I didn't want to transform. Through the fog, I remembered my family, and I felt a yearning of my own for the first time in this place. My companions simply nodded their head and gently took my hand and guided me towards a particular hole in the darkness. I gazed in and I recognized this space. It was the bottom of our basement stairs. It felt like an eternity since I had seen it. As if on command, I saw how he walked down into view, crouching down as I'd seen him do so long ago. Pressing his face to the hole, I could hear him call my name, saying he missed me and was sorry the man in the wall got me. Feeling his unadulterated sadness wash over me, I tried to call out to him, but I couldn't speak in the void. Looking to my companion, we nodded sagely to one another, and I reached a trembling hand towards my brother. I broke through as easily as I had been dragged in. I could briefly feel Howie's elation at seeing my hand as he helped drag me through. Despite that the opening was no larger than a mouse hole, I easily fit through and found myself sprawled out on top of Howie. He was screaming and laughing so loud, I hugged him and I began to cry as the emotional sedation of the place in between wore off, and I felt very much like a little kid who was lost and scared in a crowd and had just been found by their mother. We bounded up the stairs, through the kitchen, flying past police officers and extended family, into the main room and straight into my parents' arms. That hug with my mom and dad and Denise and Howie was the greatest thing I have ever experienced. Looking up, I noticed a skeletal finger reaching out and wiggling at me through a small hole near our fireplace. I let out a little smile. I knew my companion could sense my gratitude for reuniting me with my family. The next few days were a blur. I was dehydrated and borderline hypothermic when I was taken to the hospital. I lost the big toes on both feet and the tip of both my middle fingers to what the doctors diagnosed as frostbite. Otherwise, I was fine and the police questioned me for hours about where I had gone. I lied through my teeth and told them I didn't know and couldn't remember. All I could remember was being cold and that it was dark, and then suddenly I was back downstairs. Police completely demolished our basement looking for evidence of a hidden prison my parents had kept me in, or a pipe or abandoned well I could have fallen in. At the end of the day, they were more puzzled than anything, and the official report on my disappearance and discovery basically dictated I got lost and came home on my own a few days later. I could tell it really bothered some of the police. They were worried there was a child abductor on the loose and that I was too scared to say anything, but even at my age, I had the sense to realize they would never believe the truth. Everyone believed Howie was still sick and fevered, dreamed of me crawling out of the hole. When I asked him about it a few years ago, he claimed he remembered it as a dream he had. Denise is the only person I have ever told my story to, up until writing this story. While I don't doubt that she believed me, I think my story disturbed her more than whatever she had imagined happening to me while I was gone. She couldn't understand how I could be okay after witnessing murders and tragedies. How could I process that emotionally after feeling those extremes? I tried to explain to Denise the goodness I had felt in there, too, about the baby being born or feeling a toddler's joy while dancing through a sprinkler, or the old couple holding hands in a hospital room feeling such love and warmth towards one another it blazed like the sun. Eventually, I figured she probably would never understand. If it hadn't happened to myself, I'd struggle to understand. I moved on pretty quickly, yet I kept the experience close to my heart, using what I had learned to be a kinder and more empathetic person. Ever since then, every once in a while, I will catch a glimpse of a charcoal hand sliding out of a hole in the wall or crack in the floor, and they wave at me or wiggle some fingers. I smile and wave back, letting my love radiate to my friend that had shared so much with me. I let them know life is good. Second story. This story was shared by you/DG1162. Possible skinwalker encounter. Now I have to start off by saying I'm sorry that this likely won't be as exciting as you're expecting, but I can say it's 100% true. Let me start off by saying I'm a 21-year-old male from British Columbia, Canada, and I've spent most of the free time in my life outdoors one way or another. This took place several months ago now, right before winter started for real. I had a couple nights to myself this particular weekend and decided I would go for one last camping trip before it got too cold to sleep outside anymore. I texted some buddies to see if anyone wanted to tag along, but in the end I ended up going into the bush solo. There's plenty of good forestry roads around where I live, so we'd usually just drive up a dirt road until we found a nice spot and camp there, which is exactly what I did, in a spot I'd camped before no less. Anyways, I got my fire going, set up my tent and sleeping bag, and kicked back to start drinking my little night away. I was having a great time for the first couple hours. It was late in the season so the sun was setting early, but I had enough wood to keep a fire all night and enough beer to keep up. I'd camped solo many times before, so I really didn't mind loosening up a bit. However, I didn't get that chance. I don't remember falling asleep or what time it even would have been. I just remember waking up around 9 p.m., still sitting in my chair before the fire, with the deepest feeling of dread I'd ever felt in my life. The fire was still going strong, so I couldn't have been asleep for long, but I had this unshakable feeling that something was watching me. Bears would have been in hibernation at this point, and I know what it feels like to be watched by a coyote. This was something different. I decided the big I had to drink was clearly enough and tried to shake the feeling. I got my good knife and flashlight ready just for good measure as I sat with my back to fire looking into the tree line, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something up there just waiting for me to slip up. I was getting tired again after a while, but I knew I wouldn't be comfortable in the tent, so I decided to drop the back seats and sleep in the hatch of my car. At least I could lock the doors that way. Again, I have no idea what time I went to sleep, but eventually I managed to, until I woke up from the most vivid, horrifying dream I have ever had. I saw myself from a third-person perspective, sleeping in my folding chair in front of the fire, exact same camping spot, exact same details as the scene I'd woken up from not even an hour before. As I watched myself sleep in the chair, slowly the glowing eyes of coyotes emerged from the trees until they surrounded and ate me. I woke up in a cold sweat with a worse dread than I'd felt before. I had felt being eaten by the dogs, and at that point I didn't even know what was a dream and what was real. I just knew I needed to get off the mountain. I left everything set up in the campsite and crawled into my front seat to drive back down the road. On my way down I saw one single deer stare at me, and as I passed it, it walked to the middle of the road and watched me drive away. I went back the next morning to get my camping gear and nothing was out of place. But those dreams, and that deer, still haunt me if I think about them too long. I am not sure if it was truly a skinwalker or just the rural paranoia of growing up in a small town, but I tell you, I never look at deer the same anymore. Third story. This story was shared by you/a_Hawaiian_shirt. Last night, I got up to get some water. There was something standing on the balcony. The pizza box was too big to fit in the fridge. I thought of this when I woke up, a little harmless thought as I finished the last of the water on the nightstand. The water was good, really good, but it wasn't enough. I finished the water and decided to get up for more, and doing so, I thought of the obnoxious pizza box still sitting on the stove. I got more water, took it back to the bedroom. Son was sleeping on the wife's side of the bed, and I vaguely recalled them switching during the night. He took her side 'cause he thought he saw a monster. She took his room to get away from my snoring. More harmless thoughts. I sauntered over the collection of water glasses on the nightstand and placed tonight's refill. On the stove sat the pizza box. I opened it quietly like a thief in the night. Grabbed a piece, sausage. Just a quick piece, then back to bed, a little bit more water, back to sleep. First bite, all the fucking toppings come off. A bare, sauce-soaked, not as tantalizing piece of crust shining in the soft light of the stove's range hood. Panic, paper towel. Try to salvage it, place the crust on the counter, wipe my mouth with the paper towel, walk it off. I saw it then, on the balcony. I froze watching it, the paper towel still held mid-smear on my mustache. It saw me. It was watching back. We had left the blinds open, pulled just enough to the side to see out. They'd been remodeling the balconies, but there was enough planks to hold something outside the glass, 7 feet tall. Was it 8? As I watched it, I couldn't recall if I had checked the time. I didn't want to chance a look. My phone was in the bedroom, near the collection of water glasses. If I had it, I could call the police. But I'd have to look away from it. It was just standing there, standing awkwardly like it had been caught in the act. And I was reminded of how long it had been since we used the slider, how long it's been since we knew it was locked. I thought of him, sleeping next to the still warm spot I left behind. I thought of her, off in the other room to get away from the snoring. I could scream. But then what? Then we'd all just be fucking scared. I went to the balcony, moving slow, lowering the paper towel as I crossed the living room. Getting the details of it the closer I got, or the lack thereof. Long, spindly fucking arms. A hunched back. A dead hang of thin hair. It's almost December, where was its clothes? Why my balcony? It seemed happy to see me. Like this was a pleasant surprise. I felt the spike in my blood pressure, the collecting sweat in my armpits. A paper towel instead of a phone, or a bat. And I stood there, looking at it. Too scared to see if it was locked, too worried to check. Standing in the ringing, suffocating silence of the living room, I asked the only thing I could think of. What do you want? I couldn't actually hear my voice when it spoke, but it understood. Its face started to droop, a sag of skin and a slow look that drifted to the left, to my son's room. Where she slept in the child's bunk bed, to get away from the snoring. A slow look that listed lazily back to me, then past me, to where my bedroom would be. To the 8-year-old sprawled on her side of the bed. Looking into its eyes, I felt my lip tremble. Not like this. Looking into its eyes, I mouthed the word. No. It takes a deep breath, and leans against the outer frame of the slider. It gets worse the longer I look. It's a fucking nightmare. It has to be a dream. Its lungs inflate and its chest puffs out, and its skin hangs off its fucking bones. It's trying to intimidate me. It opens its mouth to talk, it makes no sound, but I understand what it's trying to say. The words chill my bones. I have all night. I think of her in his room, I think of him on her side of the bed. Paper towel squeezed in my hand, a reminder that I didn't take a leak when I got more water. So do I. The response amuses it, and it shrugs. We'll see, it says. It moves, and I panic and think it's going to try and come in. I don't think I could stop it. Its unnatural human form twists as it settles in, its limbs folding unnaturally as to sit like a dog, or a horse. It mocks me. I sit on the carpet and wait, trying to project this as no big deal. Trying to shield the fact that I'm terrified. It looks like it's freezing outside, the way it shivers. Thin skin on pointy bones, a face that won't stop sagging. We're supposed to get snow soon. It's freezing in the living room. I'm in my boxers. Goosebumps crawl over my skin. We stare at each other. I don't know if there's rules. I don't know if I can look away, or if I can check if it's locked or not. I don't think I can stop it. What happens if I fall asleep, or they wake up? I sit. I watch it, it watches me. The dark night ticks away. I don't know when it started, I don't know when it's going to end. The longer I look, the worse it gets. Sometimes it pretends to fall asleep. It's fucking with me. The worst part of all. Sometimes, the mold slips. Whatever's holding it, whatever the illusion is that serves as its existence. Like a twitch. As if its normal form wasn't bad enough. Whatever's underneath. Sometimes it's a flash of teeth and a spread of gore, like an aftermath of a hit and run. Sometimes it's up against the glass, its body flattening, its eyes staring hard at me, trying to scare me. Sometimes it's a girl, its mouth hanging open in a soundless scream. Sometimes there are no eyes at all. I sit and watch. Terrified to look away. Terrified it'll get impatient. The hours tick away, and behind it, the sun starts to break over the trees. Before the rays can touch its skin, it sighs deliberately. It's out of time. A single nod serves as my congratulations, and as it looks to her in his room, and him in my bed, its final words haunt me. You got lucky this time. It slips away in an instant, its limbs taking it back to woods. Back to whatever hell it came from. My body aches and I'm soaked in sweat. I wait until the sun is shining, the only way I'll think I'm safe. When I'm ready, I get up and check the slider. It wasn't locked. Once I fix that, I check the front door. Deadbolt and knob were both turned, but it doesn't make me feel better. I don't think I'll ever feel better again. In my hand is the paper towel, nearly perished under my squeezed grip. On the counter is a cold piece of bare pizza, the exposed sauce reminding me of the monster. I put them both in the trash. I creep to his room, and find her sleeping peacefully. I creep back to mine, and find him sprawled on my side. The water on the nightstand chills as I down the glass in one go. I place the empty next to the others, and I slowly lie down next to him, hoping I don't wake him. Hoping I don't hear anything aside from his soft little snores. I listen to the snores, and wonder if it's even possible to go back to sleep. Or if I'll ever sleep again. Fourth story. This story was shared by you/Western, string, 8768. I'm a teacher and I think one of my students isn't alive. I'm a math teacher in a small town high school. Among my students, there was one unusual boy named Tommy. He was quiet, never spoke, and didn't mingle with other students. Yet, he always scored perfect in all tests. One day, out of curiosity, I tried to engage Tommy in a chat. But he quickly walked away without saying a word. He had a certain coldness about him, which was quite off-putting. I decided to get in touch with his parents. However, the school records had no contact information for them. I found it strange but shrugged it off as a clerical error. Cryptic aura around Tommy piqued my curiosity. I tried asking around town about him. Everyone's answer was surprisingly the same: no one knew him or his family. One day, at a local diner, old Martha, an aging, long-time resident known for her sharp memory, overheard me talking about Tommy. She beckoned me over, a worried expression on her face. She claimed that there was a Tommy fitting my description who used to live in town, but he had died in a car crash 15 years ago. My blood ran cold, everything around me began to spin. Was it possible that my student was a ghost? I returned to school the next day with a lump of fear in my throat. I kept my distance from Tommy, who appeared normal as ever, acing his math test. Somehow, this normalcy sent shivers down my spine. I started digging through the old school records, which were in a chaotic state. After days of searching, I found what I was looking for, a yearbook from 15 years ago. There was Tommy, looking identical. The caption under his picture read, "In loving memory of Tommy, who left us too soon." I was scared but decided to confront Tommy. After the class, I asked him to stay back. He didn't move or speak. He was just there, standing, looking at me with blank eyes. I asked if he had died 15 years ago. Tommy smiled a sad, chilling smile and said, "Yes, but I had never been good at math. I wanted to learn it properly." Frightened and speechless, I saw him walk out of the room, disappearing into the crowd of students in the hallway. He never came to my class after that day. I told my story to a few colleagues. Some thought I was joking, others believed I was hallucinating. But old Martha believed me. We decided to hold a small memorial for Tommy by the tree in the school grounds. It was our way of telling him, it was okay to move on. Since then, I've never encountered anything supernatural. But Tommy's incident etched a lasting impression on me. In silent nights, when I'm all alone, grading papers, I can still feel a cold breeze and see a faint reflection of a boy smiling at me from the empty desks. The experience was a grim reminder. Not all our students carry the weight of their backpacks, some of them carry the weight of their souls, caught between worlds, unready for the adventure ahead. Fifth story. This story was shared by you/morbid_tales_. Don't tell skinwalker stories around the campfire. I was camping in Arizona with my cousin. We built a fire, then got some marshmallows out to make some s'mores. It was a warm night, but we were having a good time. I hadn't gone camping with my cousin in years, since we were teenagers. I blew the flame out on my marshmallow, and crushed it between 2 graham crackers, and chocolate. "Do you want to hear a scary story?" my cousin asked with a sly grin on his face. When we were younger, he used to always tell scary stories around the fire. I couldn't help but get excited. "Let's see if you still got it," I said with my own grin. "Have you ever heard of a skinwalker?" he asked, popping a marshmallow in his mouth. "Yeah, isn't it a native legend? Something about turning into a coyote?" "Yes, a skinwalker is a Navajo witch that wears the skins of animals, and can turn into any animal they want." He leans in closer so the fire illuminates his face. "What's so scary about that?" I ask. "You don't want to run into one of them." "Trust me, I have." I say nothing, waiting for him to continue on with the story. I was visiting my friend on the res one day the summer after graduation. We were hanging out on the porch, talking about what we were gonna do now that school was over. Just wasting the night away, you know. Then I noticed a coyote just wandering around a few yards away. Now in this neighborhood there weren't any fences dividing the yards, so I could see it walk from yard to yard. I nudged my friend and nodded over to it. We got quiet and just watched it. Then it stood up on 2 feet. It was pressed up against a house in the shadows and just scooted along on 2 feet like a human. I was so shocked. I didn't think coyotes could do that. My friend whispered to me, "That's no coyote." I asked him what he meant. That's a skinwalker. Now he had mentioned skinwalkers to me before, but I thought it was just a legend. and that he surely didn't believe some old story his parents told him to scare him from playing in the woods at night. Once it was next to a garbage can, it hopped on top of it, then leaped up grabbing on to the window ledge. The window was open. Fear filled my body as I realized two things. No coyote could do that. And whoever was in that room was about to have a very bad night. Then we heard the guy in that room screaming, then his screams were drowned out by a scream that was somewhat of a mix of animal and human. We fell out of our chairs scrambling to get inside. We locked all the doors and windows and hid. That was the scariest night of my life. I don't remember if cops showed up to that house. We were too scared to leave the room and check. But it's a night I'll never forget. Goosebumps cover my arms. Now that was a good story. I didn't believe him about it being true, but it was a good story nonetheless. Looks like you still got it, that was good. Got me being scared to look into the trees. I laughed nervously looking behind me at the forest that seems just a little scarier now. Hey, every word of that is true. I didn't make this one up. No need to make up a scary story when you've lived it. He has a pleased look on his face nonetheless. We sat in silence for a bit and I thought about the story he just told. For some reason a coyote creeping around on two legs just seems comical. I laughed to myself. Maybe it would be creepier in person. After another 30 minutes, the fire dies down and we crawl into our tent. All thoughts of skinwalkers had left our heads. I was drifting off to sleep when a stick snapping outside our tent woke me up. My face was facing the wall of the tent and I don't think I'd quite registered what woke me up. After a few seconds I closed my eyes and prepared to go back to sleep. Then I heard my cousin outside the tent calling my name. I opened my eyes. I assumed my cousin had stepped outside for some reason, but I didn't know what he would need me for out there. I didn't quite want to leave my sleeping bag, so I was just gonna pretend like I didn't hear him. I closed my eyes again. Then I heard him call me again. Annoyed, I sat up to leave the tent. That's when I noticed my cousin right next to me. Asleep. I knew I heard him call me from outside the tent. I heard it twice. There was no mistake. I shook him awake. "What do you want?" he asked groggily, not opening his eyes. "I heard your voice outside the tent calling my name. Am I going crazy?" He opens his eyes, a panicked look in his eyes. "You're absolutely sure?" "My voice?" he asks. "Yeah. Twice. There was no mistaking it." He pulls me down to the ground next to him. We hear some shuffling outside the tent. I start to freak out a little. That's a skinwalker. They can imitate voices. That's how they draw you in. He whispers. "A skinwalker? Are you sure? What's the odds of a skinwalker showing up the same night you tell me the story?" "Do not mess with me," I whisper back. "Talking about a skinwalker at night can draw it to you. I didn't think about that when I told the story. Just stay quiet and stay down and hopefully it will leave." The sound of another stick snapping didn't help at all. After a few long frightful hours of laying their eyes wide open, it seemed to go away. Eventually, I fell asleep, I guess. I don't remember falling asleep, and don't know how I could. My cousin was already packing everything up by the time I crawled out of the tent. "I know we planned for 2 more nights, but we're getting out of here right now." "Yeah, I'm with you on that," I said. Now I can't say for sure it was a skinwalker that night. But I can say I definitely heard my cousin calling my name from outside the tent when he was sleeping right next to me. And that was by far the creepiest thing to ever happen to me. So take my advice and save the skinwalker stories for when you're safe in the comforts of home and not for the campfire. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions/suggestions in the comments section, and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm.